using Google as a third-party authentication authority. To do that, we're going to need to install a couple of libraries. Here we have the core passport.js library, which we covered in the last lecture, and we installed the local strategy, where we were responsible for handling the authentication and authorization of the user against our own databases. Instead, this time around, we're going to be using a third-party authentication authority, which is going to be Google OAuth. And there's quite a few other that you can install, including Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter. There's quite a few. And the way it's going to work is that a login request is going to come in from the client, right? We're going to click on a button on our client, or on our Angular client. It's going to go out to our server, right? And from within our server, we're going to redirect that to Google's authentication website, right? So Google has its own website, right? And web application that deals with authentication. So what the user is going to see is the page rendered by the Google authentication authority, right? And and Google's going to challenge the person. It's going to say, log in, right, with username and password. This would be Google's own login information. Yes. And the way it's going to work is that our application, right, our webdev 2016, spring 2017. We need to register it with Google or Facebook or LinkedIn. We need to register it. It says, hey, we're an application. We would like to use your services to authenticate our users, right? And Google is going to give us a couple of keys, right, and secrets that we need to store securely on our servers. And when we redirect our user to log in with Google, we're going to pass this information to Google, saying, hey, we want to authenticate this user, and it's us, you know, the application that is registered a little while ago, right? So what Google is going to look at, it says, okay, it's going to ask the user, the Google user, says, hey, this application is asking you to log in with them, right? Are you okay? Right? They're asking for certain information. They're asking for your username. They're asking for your email. Maybe some images, right? Maybe some personal information, gender, date of birth, things like that, right? And are you okay with it, right? And then the user is gonna consent or not, right? If they do consent, Google will authenticate them, and then call us back. We're gonna provide when we register our application. We register also a URL, okay? Our application that we're hosting. Right, our server, where Google is going to generate a GET request, right, back to our server, passing us the result of trying to authenticate a person, right? It's going to tell us whether it was successful or not, right? Maybe if I let me draw this. So here's the browser, right? Here's our server. Our Node.js server, and here is Google, and our application has already registered with Google, so they've registered with Google, so register, and Google has given us, we register only once, and they give us a client ID, right, and a secret, okay, and we configure passport.js, passport.js Google authentication with the client ID and the secret, right? So when the browser comes in with a request to log in using Google, right? We're listening at that at a point, right? At a GET request here, right? And we take all this information, the Google client ID, and the secret, and then we generate a request to Google, right? Passing this information to Google. So Google looks up in our database, in its own database, looks up the client ID, the secret, right, that we had registered, and we're passing over, and it says, okay, it's you, webdev spring 2017 application or project or whatever, right? And it says, I know who you are, okay. So the browser, what they see is a redirect. They see the page that Google generates, okay. So So the Node.js is going to redirect the browser to the Google page. Google is going to present a username and password, and is going to here in this request that we're asking Google that we want to authenticate the user. We're going to ask for certain information about the user, right? We're going to say, I want to know their email, I want to know their first name, their last name, their contact information, their images, things like that, right? And what Google, when the user gets redirected to authenticate, right? Google's going to list all the things that our application is asking for them, right? And the person can accept certain things, can reject certain others, right? And once they authenticate, they provide a username and password. Google looks them up in their own databases, right? And then Google responds to us at a point. We need to register a callback URL, right? We're gonna be listening at that request, just like we can listen from a browser. We can listen from anybody, right? Anybody can generate an HTTP request. So it sends an HTTP request with the profile information for the user that just logged in. Okay, and what we're going to do is going to say, okay, we're going to store that user in our database, right, with the profile information, right? We don't know their username. We get the information that it's in the profile, might include the email, first name, last name, gender, date of birth, whatever they agreed to share with us. Okay, only things they need to share with us. At a minimum, they will provide the unique ID, right? Google's unique ID. So that we can uniquely identify one user versus another user, right? One Google user versus another Google user. Make sense, right? So this we store it in the database. If they're not already there, we check to see if the user is already there, right? If they're already there, we just say, okay, we're just going to log them in, right? If they're not there, we're going to insert into the database and make them the currently logged in user. And then just respond to the user as a currently logged in user. That makes sense? Okay. All right. Yes.
Once you click for the Google authentication, can you register there?
Register with Google.
Yeah. You ask username, password, and they say I want to register. Come back to the application.
Huh. I haven't tried registering brand new.
I think it's for existing users.
I think it's only for existing users.
So if I select use the application and then I go.
Yeah, you register separately and then try to come back and log in brand new.
Second question is that when the Google gives me back some profile information, does it have password information?
No password information. Yeah, it's always against the Google, right? We never know any of that information. So you'll never authenticate with us, right? You'll always be redirected to Google, right? And Google will say whether you are. There's also another issue here is that when you come back next time and you click that you want to log in with Google, the request is going to go out to Google, including any cookies that Google might have given us, right? So it's being stored in the browser. So this entire request, right? Google, when it authenticates and says yes, you are authenticated, it comes back with a cookie that eventually gets stored here in the browser, right? So next time around when we click that we want to log in with Google, this whole thing is going to happen again. It's going to go out to Google. Google's going to see the cookie that it had generated. It says, oh, it's you again, right? So it's not going to challenge you the second time, right? So when you click on log in with Google, you'll immediately, if your session hasn't timed out or you haven't logged out of Google, you'll be immediately identified as a valid user, right? Which is nice, right? And there's really no way to log out of Google, right? Because Google is not just this application, but Google might have tons of other applications. You have Gmail, and you have Google Plus, and you have Sheets and Docs and all those things. So logging out of Google is a fail. It would be very, very cumbersome, right? So as long as Google identifies that it's still you, right? This would come back without challenging you. It would validate the cookie. It would immediately come back saying, yes, I know that person, right? They're still good. That I'm not going to challenge them with a username and password. Again, we're going to look you up in the database as you are a valid user. Any profile information that we have our own, right? Any other information that any domain objects that we might be related to, any other reviews or comments or stories or blogs that we might have generated here. We would combine it with our own database and then display a profile for you with both information. Okay, right. So we install it using Passport Google Auth and the -- save. Don't forget the -- save. Make sure that the library is registered as a dependency in your package.json file, right? Which you should already have this installed in the template project that came along with the course at the beginning. If you open up your package.json, you should see that Passport Google OAuth should be there already. Okay. Let's see. Anything on the server? No, that's it. Okay, we had done that. We had installed it. All right, so let's start implementing this on the client side. So first of all, we're going to add an additional button, an additional login button to our login page. Okay, and I believe we had already started working on that. So let me see where were we. So I have a stuffy nose. Let's see. Okay, so here's Passport, and we had already created a login page, and here's the login page. So let's navigate there. So there's localhost 3000, lectures, Passport. Maybe not. Maybe login. Okay, I think this is it, right? Right. So I believe this is our application, and the which is this login over here. Let's add an additional button to be able to log in with Google. Right now, we just have configuration to log in using our local strategy, right? So let's add the capabilities of logging in with Google, right? So I have here a button that we can copy, right, and paste it right underneath our login here, right? So register. Here's our login button right there. So let's add the Google. There we go. So if we refresh our application, see we have a brand new button to log in with Google. All right. Also, you'll notice that I have here a class. I have a span that gives a class. It's using FA Google Plus. This is from Font Awesome, which has all the vendors represented there. And so for this project, I don't have Font Awesome loaded. So I believe I gave you here a link to Font Awesome. There it is. So you can copy that and add it as a style sheet to your index page. All right, so if I add that, it'll download the CSS for Font Awesome. So if you reload, notice that now it has the Google Plus logo next to it, right? And this was Facebook, this LinkedIn, all of them are there, right? The major social networks and the major vendors are all there. So notice the URL on this. The URL here says /auth/Google. See that? So what this is saying is that I am going directly to the server. Right? I'm not going to my Angular application. Right? This is presumably the server's listening for an incoming GET, right? Mapped at that URL /auth/Google. Right? So let's make it a little more specific, since this is the morning lecture. We'll say morning. Okay, so /morning/auth/Google. Right, I'll need to do this again tomorrow night. So there is this endpoint right here, right? Node.js is going to receive an incoming GET, right? And what Node.js is going to do is going to take our configuration and then redirect our request, going to redirect it to Google, Yes.
Are there any security concerns with having this API just open to anybody coming to talk to it?
Well, they're going to be redirected to Google, right? So they can authenticate. So anybody can authenticate, right? If they're not who they say they are, it'll be rejected. Right? Passport is going to be protecting this. Right? Passport is the one who's going to be interacting with this. Okay. So once we have that, if we click on it, right now there's nobody at the server listening for that incoming GET request, right? All right, so we need to create a service layer on the server side to listen for this incoming request, okay? And the server side, let's see, we must have been here in the lectures in Passport.js, and this must be the service. There it is, right here. And this is a service we worked on last week. Okay, all the APIs had this lecture morning. So let's stick to that naming convention. So we'll call this lecture morning. So lecture morning. There we go. And maybe it's not an API. Okay, let's see. So on here on the server side, we're going to be listening for an incoming app.get and that request, right? So it's this one right here. We're going to be listening for that incoming request. And for now, we're just going to say hello. Request, response, console, log, logging in with Google. Yes? Well, the server is going to have the configuration with the client ID. You're going to have the secret. Right? It's going to have a passport that's going to be handling this request.
So in the config, you have to enter that.
Yes, we need to configure that. We haven't configured it yet. Right now, it's just handling the intent of the user of logging in using Google. So here, Passport is going to grab that request, right? It's going to grab the client ID, the secret ID, right? And it's going to redirect all that information to the Google authentication. Okay. All right. So it's let's see. It's this server app right here. Maybe not. It's this one. Let's see. It's using this service. It's using this model, and it's using this database right here, right? Let's see. We're going to need to include this model here in the server. So let's open up the server, and it was, which one is it? Let's see. Passport service, lectures, passport. Was it this one? Must be this one, right? Must be that one. Okay, and let me shut off test. And I imagine we had created a couple of users there, right? So let's restart this. Let's make sure that this still works as we had it. We had several users. Was Bob one of them? Yes, Bob was one of them, right? And Bob apparently is an admin. And we had created Alice, Bob, Charlie, Dan, and Ed. Right? This is what we did late last week. Right, so we want to be able to use add Google. All right, so let's keep going. So let's load the Passport library, which I believe we already have done that in the service. So in the service, in the user service, load Passport library. We've done that. We're now going to load also the Google's authentication strategy library, right? And that we're going to copy that and we're going to put it in here. There it is. Okay, we loaded that. Very good. Now we need to configure the client ID, right, and the secret that we register with Google. Okay, and you do that at Google's developer console. So if you go to Google Developer Console, you log in with your credentials. And this is taking a while. So here you're going to create the authentication keys, right, and the secret, and you're going to register your application, right, and it's going to give you these this information. So you would go. You can enable several APIs such as the Google Maps API, YouTube API. There's tons and tons of really cool Google APIs. We would turn on credentials here. And I've already created one for this course, and I've named it webdev Spring 2017. Okay, and when I created it, it gave me the client ID, which I shouldn't be recording. It also gave me a secret. Okay, so the client ID is not enough. Right, I need the secret, right, which is not being shown here. Okay, so the way to do that, you create a credential. You say create credentials. Right, and this one right here, OAuth client ID, right? And when you create that, you're going to say, well, this is a web application. Is it an iOS? Is it a PlayStation, Chrome app, Android? So what kind of application is this, right? So I selected web. You give it a name. Once you give it a name, you need to configure whether you want to be able to log in from a server. Right? Is it a server that is generating this request, right? Or is it a JavaScript running on the browser that is generating this request, right? It's much safer and secure if you're generating from the server, right? So you're not showing any of these keys. Once you create it, you say create. Let's see. Here's the callback. So this callback, this is a URL that it wants to be able to call you back, right? To notify you whether it was successful or not, right? So what I did is I added HTTP : / 127.0.0.1 / oops. Oh, it's not letting me edit it. Why are you not letting me edit it? There we go. And I probably said something like Google callback. Right, I said create. And notice that it gives me a client ID and a secret, right? And you shouldn't show this anywhere. You should copy this, right, and put it in a file. I'm going to throw it away. I'm not going to use this. But you would go in there and you can configure several things. So this is the client ID, the secret, the name of your application. So I went through all this, right? Cancel. And I'm going to throw it away. And I put all those values. I put it in my Bash profile, right? As environment variables. Okay? And the names that I gave them were very similar to what I have here. Okay, Google Client ID. The only thing that I changed was that I added underscore webdev Spring 2017. Right, that's all I did. I added a new. Yes.
Can we have more than one callback URL?
Yes. Yes, you can have several. So, for instance, you can have one for local and one for when it's deployed. Right.
And then within an application, can I create like 2-3 callback URLs?
I'm sorry, say again?
When the login is confirmed,
Yeah.
instead of having to call one callback function, can I ask Google to call 2 or 3 functions from my
It will notify. It will call all those get. It will generate all those get requests. So everybody's going to get the same request, same profile.
So in this var Google config,
Yeah.
there's only one callback actually. So how to make it in a way?
Oh, comma separated. Yep. Yep. So I created these, and I don't want to. Do I have this? I'm going to make it really, really tiny because I don't want to edit it. I don't want to show it. There it is. Okay, this is what I called it. Google Client ID Spring 2017, Client Secret Spring 2017, and URL Spring 2017. All right, those are the names that I gave it. So here I'm going to grab this code, right? And in my code, I'm going to configure this. I'll put it. Let's see. Let's configure it right here. Right, and so this will be underscore spring 2017. Now you should never actually hard code it in your source code. Okay. And obviously you're going to have it installed locally in your environment variables in your local machine, but you also have to install it right in the remote server, right? Whether it's Heroku or AWS or OpenShift, you'll need to create those environment variables there as well. Okay, so that when it runs there, it finds those either when it's running locally or remotely. Okay, so once we configure this, we can then listen for that incoming request. Right, that request that we had earlier, right here that we're listening on, this one lecture morning OAuth Google. What we're going to do is going to say, hey Passport, you handle it, right? You handle it, right? And use the Google strategy, and so redirect all this, right? Redirect this request that is coming from the browser, right? Redirect it to Google. Let Google handle all this, right? And pass along any information that we're configuring right now. Okay? Yes.
For the environment variables to be available to the intelligent, do we need to restart intelligent?
Yeah, you need to restart WebStorm. Yeah, we need to start with WebStorm. Right, if you configure the environment variables, they won't be available until you source them, right? And then you restart the server, right? WebStorm. Yes.
After what configure your run configuration, what your environment variables are, you don't want to restart WebStorm.
Okay.
So you don't need to do it through Windows.
Okay. Awesome. So we have so we're gonna have Passport handle that request, right? So we're gonna copy this. So instead of us saying here hello, right, we're going to tell Passport you handle it, and I'm gonna ask for general profile information, email. This might include first name, last name. So this is going to be redirected to Google. So this is what sends us to the login page at Google, right? And Google's going to come back to us. I'm sorry. We need to. Google's going to come back to us saying whether it was successful or not. So this URL needs to match the URL that we gave it, right? And it's going to be relative, right? Well, relative to the domain that's going to be running on, right? So this will either be localhost, colon 3000 / auth Google callback, right? Or it'll be your domain / right? So wherever it's deployed, it'll be that URL. Yes.
Parameters passed in this group parent, do they correspond to something like Passport has, or is it Google?
Or yeah, no, these are Google specific. Yeah, and LinkedIn will have a different thing, and each one will have a different, and they're all documented what you're asking for. Profile and email are standard across all of them. So what the Google's going to call us back, and I don't remember what the callback was. What callback did I register? What did I register? Oh, great! I'm showing all my secrets. All right, I'll change it. So it's right here. It's this one right here. So Google OAuth callback. So I'll copy that. So that means that that over here, right? That's my callback. Google / OAuth callback. Right. And what Google what's going to happen is that Passport we're registering here two URLs, right? That we're going to be handling. Notice the hash here, right? This is going to be redirecting to our application, right? To our Angular application, which is running on the browser, right? The browser has the routing here, right? It has all the Angular application working here in the MVC application, right? So we need to navigate there. And actually, it's going to be hash bang because we're using the latest version of Angular. Also, the logging is actually right here. Right? It's this whole thing, right? This whole thing. So this will be login right here, and this will be profiles right here, right? So this will be profile. Yes. No, we don't. Remember that we removed all session management from the URL. Session management is now handled by cookies in session. Right? There's no IDs anymore. Right? Yeah, all that is being stored in the cookie session. Right? In the session cookie. All right, so we're almost there. So next, we need to tell a Passport to use the Google strategy. It says here's the Google strategy. And use this configuration that we created earlier. Where is it? Did we create it? Oh, there it is. All right, so let me move this down here. Right here. Okay, we're telling that the Google strategy is going to use this configuration file, and this is the function that is going to allow us to interact with the Google strategy. Right here, this is the function that excuse me, that the Google strategy is going to invoke, right, providing us with a profile information. Right, so it's going to, if it's successful, right, it's going to notify us right here, calling this information, right, and pass us profile information that we had asked for. Okay. There it is. Let me copy that. This is a function. So we really care about this profile over here. Also, we have this. Remember the done function that we used earlier for the local strategy. This allows us to notify the Passport framework that yes, this is a valid user. Make them the current logged in user, right? So that throughout the rest of the application, they live in the session, and we don't need to authenticate them again, right? All right. All right. So once we have them, what we want to be able to do is say if the user already exists. See if this is a Google user ID that already has authenticated with us earlier, right? Because we want to be able to map this user. With other domain objects, right? The same things that a normal user uses, their username and password. The same affordances we want for a Google user, right? So the same thing. So we need to be able to map them to the rest of the domain model. So we're going to look them up. We're going to look them up using our user model. Right? See if they already exist. If they don't exist. All right, so we're going to have a then here. Right, so this user is either going to be null if it doesn't exist. So the very first time the Google user is not going to be there, right? Obviously, if they do exist, we found them. We just say we're done, right? This is the current logged in user. We call done. And we pass the user object in there, right? Saying that this is, and that information is going to be stored now in the cookie. Okay. If the user doesn't exist, meaning it's not in a database, then this is a brand new Google user. We're going to extract from the profile object that comes back from Google. This object is different for different strategies. So Facebook is a little bit different. Google's a little bit different. Right? The way they structure, the way they represent their own users, okay, it's a little bit different. Okay, in Google, the profile object that comes back to us contains an emails array that contains all the emails that user is associated with. Right. So I have a couple emails, right? Gmail emails. We're grabbing the first one. Right, and retrieving the value. Then, because we don't have a username, I'm going to grab the first part of the email, and I'm going to make it the username. So that's going to be the username. Obviously, I would need to check to see if it's unique, if it doesn't collide with any other usernames that we might have in our other users. But I'm just showing you that we can grab information from the profile. So we're splitting it. I only want the first part. There it is, the email parts. So I'm going to grab that as a username. This username, first name, last name, email, that's part of the existing schema for our user. But here we're adding a couple more things. We're adding a new part of the schema, right? We're adding a Google attribute, which is going to, we're going to store the ID. This is a unique identifier for Google. This is how Google uniquely identifies their users, right? This is their primary key, right, in their own databases, which they share with us. We're going to keep it there so that we can validate this Google ID later on. A token is used to check whether the authentication is still valid. Right? Tokens allows us to pass around these tokens and see that it's still valid, that you don't need to authenticate. It's like a cookie, right? That you don't need to authenticate us anymore as long as the token is still good. So over here, so this is if the user was successfully added. If not, we create a brand new user and we use a user model, create user, which we already have, right? And we pass in the new Google user, right? Let's see, I think the domain model does not have this yet, so we're going to need to add this. All right, so let's add that to our domain object for the user. So let's go to the domain model. Let's see, there it is, user model. Notice that the schema that we were playing around last week has a username, password, first name, doesn't have email, so let's add email. Okay, it had roles, right? It doesn't have the Google attribute, so let's add the Google attribute. And the Google attribute has two child attributes, ID and token, right? So this is going to be ID, it's going to be a string, and it's going to have a token, also a string. Okay, all right. This is referred to as an embedded schema, right? So this is the parent schema. This is a parent schema, and this is a sub schema. So it's an object within an object, right? And again, non-relational databases such as Mongo allows you to create these nested schemas within schemas within schemas, arrays of schemas of arrays, and you can nest them as complex as you want. So when we query, when we do a find, or find by ID, or find one, right? We can use usernames and passwords to retrieve a unique ID. For instance, when we see find user by credentials, right? We can say find one, and then we can use the properties for filtering. Yes, right? We can do something similar for filtering by the Google ID. See that? To be able to refer to this ID, over here we just use plain old username and password. But to refer to this ID, it would be Google.ID. Right? So you can refer to this ID there. So this over here that says find user by Google ID, see that? We don't have that, right? We need to implement that. So let's add that. So this will be user model dot find Google user by ID, and let's implement that function find user by Google ID. So this would be Google ID, and this would be return user model dot find one, and this would be find one, and it would be that we want to retrieve Google ID. So we're pattern matching the Google.ID. It needs to be equal to the Google ID parameter that we pass in, right? So find one user whose Google ID matches that ID. Yes? Okay. So that returns a then, which then, if there is a user, we just log them in. Otherwise, we're going to create the user, right? Notice that the create the user returns another then, right? This returns another then. So this whole thing, this whole then returns this here. So this is a wait a minute, what's this? Oh, this goes here. So this whole thing can have another then, right, over here, which I have over here. So there it is. So this is the other then, right after that. Okay. Alternatively, we could have done this, right? We could have done this right here, like that, and then dot then. Yes? Okay. The problem with this is perfectly fine, right? You could do this way, but you can imagine that once you have lots of these nested database calls, right? Your code tends to start skewing to the right. See that with these nested thens and nested thens and nested thens, and it makes it very, very hard to read. Okay, so the strategy is to not do this, right, and instead you return this, and you catch it right here, this then right here. See that? So that was the whole point of creating these promises, right? So that you can have an alternative syntax, right, of writing the same exact code, right, but instead of writing in this skewed mechanism, right, the syntax that makes it hard to read, allows you to write it in a vertical fashion, which makes it a little bit easier to read, especially if you have lots of these things, right? Let me go check if this user exists. Let me check if there's a username already taken. Let me do that, and then create it, right? All these are asynchronous calls, right? And promises allows you to write it as if they were synchronous, as if they were happening one after another, right? Even though they are asynchronous. Yes? Right? All right. So this returns creates a brand new user. We get the user right here. We log them in, right? Otherwise, we have error handling right there. Let's see. Anything else? All right. Let's give it a whirl. So let's restart this, and let's sniff what happens here on the network. Also, let's put a couple of console log. I'd like to see the profile that comes back from Google. Let me restart that. Okay, so if I click on Google, it says that there's an error. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Lectures morning passport.js user validation failed. Mongoose error. Blah 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 blah. Okay, so this is Mongoose. Mongoose is didn't like what we sent it. Probably when we try to create it. Let's see what happened here. So this is our hitting our server, our own server, and looks like Google did respond, right? Google did respond. I must have been already logged into Google, right? So because it didn't challenge me, let's see. Did the server say anything here? Let's see. Okay, notice that Google did respond, right? So we got into that code, right, where Google responded with a profile. That's my ID. That's my display name, Jose Annunziato. Emails, I have just that one email. Have even a picture of me, several other images, gender, emails, URLs, display names. And then it failed. Let's see, validation, yada yada yada. Document invalidate. Okay, so I must have created something that was not in the model. Let's see. Profile username. Did I misspell something here? Oh, I probably said password required. Maybe that's it. Okay. Let's go to the model. The model, right? So password. Perhaps let's say that it's not required. Let's try it again. Let's see what Mongo says. And I believe the database we're using is this one right here. So let's copy that. And let's say use that database, show collections. Okay, we just have that one collection, so let's grab that. So db dot and then find and then pretty. All right, so we have Charlie, Ed, Dan, Bob. All right, we have those as always. Let's try it again. Did I restart the server? I forget. I think so, right? Let's try that again. So go back and let's try to go to Google again. Notice that this time was successful, right? It says, "Yep, you're logged in." It grabbed my my name here. My username is Jen Nunzi, so it grabbed it from my email. Okay, I have an ID. That's Google's ID. So if I search this again in the database, notice that I just added myself there. See, username Jen Nunzi, the email, right, and Google ID and the token, right? So yes.
So if you want the password required,
Yeah.
just keep it like that. Send a garbage one to because then when we like actually have a register, then we usually able to register without the password.
Right, exactly. So you can make it a little more nuanced, right? We can have the validation not done at the database level. We could have it at the application level, right? So if you try to log in or register not using Google, right, then we would validate whether the password's missing there, right? So we can add that there. Yes.
Say the user has joined our website using Google, but later decides to create his username and password.
Yeah.
So how do we reconcile?
Yeah, that's tough. And a lot of vendors haven't solved that yet. You know, I still have 3 iTunes accounts, right? And I can't reconcile all of them 3. I have movies and songs and all sorts of things, and Apple will not allow you to reconcile. It's me. I have to log into all 3. But yes, I mean you could create a mechanism, right, where you can claim 2 different accounts, right, and say that this other account is also mine, right? So you could provide that kind of a mechanism, right, and create one single user.
And one more thing is, say the user revokes access to this app.
Yeah.
Using security settings.
Yeah.
So are we responsible to clean up all the data?
We don't really have any information here, right? That you already given me.
All the websites and widgets that he created.
Yeah.
So do we clean all that up?
Well, that would be in our policy, in our who owns what. Usually, vendors will say that anything you create in our application, we own. And read the fine print and read all the policies of who owns what. But obviously, I would not be able to if I revoke, then they would not have access to anything. For some reason, one of the things that they might ask is that can I post in your Google Plus. Can I post on your behalf, right? Can I post on your timeline? Or same thing, Facebook, right? You can ask, can I post for you? And you can say yes, 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 but at some point you can revoke that, right? So even though they might have our credentials and they can log in, but you can't do certain things. Or I might have given you access to my contact list, but I can revoke that at some point. So you would not be able to see that too late, right? Because it might be that I have a snapshot of the time when you did give me permission, and I just downloaded everything, right? And I have a cached copy of that until you revoke it, right? And then I can't post for you, right? But yeah, all those are privacy issues that you would have to provide some kind of policy, and people have to agree to it. Yes.
How did it know that you were already logged in?
It's the browser is already logged in. It knows it's me, Jose. So let's try it with a it's me. The browser has a session for me. Let's try it with an incognito, right? So that it won't have the cookies. No, the browser knows my identity because I'm already logged in with the browser. So when I start Chrome, so if I use Safari, for instance, right? Let's use Safari. If I use Safari, Safari doesn't know who I am, right? So it won't be able to authenticate me. So let's use Safari. So let's use Passport and use Safari. And I go to Google. Safari doesn't know anything about me, right? So it doesn't have any cookies for me. So Google says, I don't know who you are, right? So it's authenticating me, right? Because it doesn't know. Once I log in, so it's asking me, are you okay with these folks having storing your information offline? It says yes, I allow, and so it goes to my profile, right? If I log out, I go back to here and try to log in again. Notice that the second time does not challenge me, right? It made the same the same network connectivity went out, right? The same request. It did go out to Google. Google came back and said, oh, I know who you are already. I set a cookie, right? So it has its own session mechanism, right? And so it came back with a profile information saying, yes, this user is good. Right? It uses a token. Yes?
So Google's cookie, but you're not actually looking at it?
Yeah, I'm not looking at it. Yeah. Yeah, it goes out to Google, has its own cookie management. Yeah. So even though I say log out, right, I am logging out of my passport session. But as far as Google is concerned, you're still logged in, right? Because it has its own cookie. You've invalidated the session, so I can't go to admin, for instance, right? I can't type here profile, right? I can't because the cookie, passport's cookie was invalidated, right? So passport doesn't know anything about me anymore, right? But Google does, right? So if I try to go to Google, Google's going to say, oh yeah, I know who you are. And then it's going to come back to me and says, oh, you're a valid user, and Passport now has been notified that this is a valid user, and it creates a brand new cookie, right? But it's the same Google cookie. So the Google cookie stays for me for a long, long time, right? Could be a whole year without me logging into Google, right? But the Passport cookie gets invalidated every time I log out, right, or it times out. Right? So it's two different sessions that are happening here.
So if you're like, let's say you're logged out everything incognito, and then you log into your app using Google.
Yeah.
If you like went to Gmail, would that login count for all the other Google?
Yes. Yeah, it's the same cookie. Yep. Yep. You've authenticated. Yeah. With any application you authenticate with Google, you authenticate it for the entire thing. Yep. All right. Everybody okay? Awesome. Right. Yes.
So if you register with Google, it takes like basic information like first name from Google.
Yes.
And then if a user updates their profile in your application,
Yes.
that won't change.
That won't change because it was created at first, right? And what you're creating, right? What you're editing is how your application knows things about you, right? That it had by default it had copied things from the profile from Google, right? But then you're free to change it to whatever you want it to be, right?
It won't create a conflict of any sort when you log in again.
No, right? Because it only gets created once, right? If you were not there, or if it doesn't find you. So that's why we're authenticating against the Google ID and not the ID, our own ID, right? We're checking against Google's ID. Log out. Everybody good? All right. All right, let me stop this.